Today we're sitting down with Stephen Shapiro, an expert in innovation, collaboration, and one of my favorites, goal-free living. For over 20 years, Stephen's been helping hundreds of thousands of people in over 40 countries enable innovation in their lives and in their workplaces. His books have included 24/7 Innovation, Goal-Free Living, and Best Practices Are Stupid, 40 Ways to Out-Innovate the Competition. He's been featured in Newsweek, The Wall Street Journal, The New York Times, and some of his clients have included Nike, Microsoft, NASA, Johnson & Johnson, and Accenture, to name a few. Stephen, thank you so much for sitting down with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure.
So first, I wanted to brag on you with a little bit, if you don't mind. I first encountered Stephen when I read his book, Goal-Free Living, about 8 years ago, and it had a huge impact on me. I loved your book, and all the lessons in it have led me to where I am today. I really appreciate you writing it. You're one of the first authors I connected with who showed me how to tell your personal story, find more meaning in your life, and balance as well. And first, I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's really interesting because as an author, you just really never know who reads your books and the impact it has, and so it's sort of like throwing a message out into the world and hoping that somebody finds it. So I appreciate the feedback.
So to get started, could you tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea to write Goal-Free Living?
Uh, Well, Go Free Living was actually going to be a book on innovation. So what happened was I was traveling around the country back in 2003, and I just came out with a book on corporate innovation, and I wanted to write a book on personal innovation. So how do individuals sort of innovate their lives? And so I hopped in my car, and I literally had no plans. I did not know where I was sleeping each night. I drove around, and basically, when I got into a city, would hop onto the internet, which, as you can imagine, 10 years ago wasn't quite as accessible as it is today, and I'd book hotel rooms. And basically, it was this unplanned trip where I was going to interview all these creative individuals. And I guess a couple things came out of it. One is the trip itself became sort of a metaphor for how to live, unplanned, spontaneous. It's actually called planned spontaneity. So it wasn't completely unplanned, but I didn't know where I was going to go from day to day, night to night, or where I was going to sleep. The other thing which I discovered, though, is that the people who were most creative, most successful, and probably more importantly, most passionate about their lives were the people who didn't relate to their goals the way most people relate to them. And so the book was sort of born out of that trip a little more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, and in the beginning of your book, you talk about how you wanted to find people who had passion-filled lives, but then take an approach that could be replicated by anyone. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you thought of that idea and how you were able to achieve that by talking to so many wonderful people.
Well, I think the one thing which I do particularly well is I'm able to connect the dots between a lot of things. So I don't claim to know anything particularly well, but I'm able to pull lots of different things that are out there and sort of blend them together into something that might be a new instance of something that had not occurred before. So I meet all these people, and I identify like 25 different traits and behaviors that were common amongst a lot of the people. But it was this thing that they weren't so worried about the future. They were much more about doing cool things today. That was the most important thing for them. So what I learned for myself is earlier on in life, I got a little too attached to my goals. I got very focused on becoming successful. You mentioned Accenture. Well, I actually worked for Accenture for 15 years. And in the early stages, I think like most people when you're in your 20s, you just get, okay, well, I'm going to be here in 5 years. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it was maybe a good thing from a work perspective, but not necessarily a great thing from a life perspective. And it had some consequences and implications. My marriage dissolved as a result of it. And so, I won't say the goals destroyed my life. That would be a little far-fetched, but it didn't give me the life I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to realize that, maybe, enjoying today, but not like in a sort of esoteric way, but really like enjoying today in a very clear, pragmatic, I'll call it even a left-brained way, was going to be my key to success. And I don't claim that goal-free living is the answer for everyone, because there are some people who actually are wired to love their goals, to be able to check things off their to-do list. I mean, there are people that is their modus operandi, but for people like me, people who really want to experience life, and it's not about achievement, but rather about experience, I think that's where Goal for Living came in. And I think I had aspirations of changing the minds of the goalaholics out there. And the reality is there are some people who just like them, and that's totally fine.
And I love how you said originally you were going to look at creativity, but instead you started seeing creative living as something that was a commonality between all these people. So you focused on creative living, and I love that term. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Sure, creativity is sort of the development of new ideas, which is interesting, and certainly in the world of business, which is where I spend most of my time. Uh, Creativity is important, but creative living to me is how do you apply the concepts of creativity to your life? How do you not do, and part of it comes down to not getting sucked into the lifestyle that everybody else thinks you should have. And if you think about it, society has so many different norms. Like if you're not somebody who aspires to, or actually has this well-defined objective, where do you want to be in 5 years? If you can't answer that in 20 seconds, somebody looks to you like you're a slacker. And the truth is, I've never known where I wanted to be in 5 years. I just know I want to be alive, I want to be happy, I want to be healthy, and have great friendships and relationships. Beyond that, the means of getting all those things to me is less important.
Mhm.
So to me, creative living is actually undoing the things that our parents told us. Hey, you have to do this, or undoing the things that society says, or the things we feel like we have to do. It's really about figuring out what do you want to do, how do you want to live your life, and choosing to live your life in your terms, which in many cases will end up being a much more successful form of living, however you define success.
Yeah, I love that. So along the way, you found these eight secrets. You said there were maybe 25 different commonalities you saw, but in the book you have eight that I think are wonderful. I wanted to step through them a little bit with everybody. So you said these passionate people that you met lived by these eight secrets. And the first one is use a compass, not a map. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. And I think the first and the last may be the two most important. And this one basically is using a compass, not a map, means you want to have a sense of direction, not a specific destination. And then you want to meander with purpose. And so if I were to actually sum up goal free living in just 3 words, it'd be meandering with purpose.
Hmm.
And it's not haphazardly. So, I mean, if you're goal oriented, you're very focused. I mean, you're going like really, really narrow, like a laser beam, as to a specific point you want to be in the future. To me, meandering with purpose is sort of like a 45, uh, 75-degree angle where you sort of play inside of that and you move from experience to experience, adjusting the future aspirations as you gain more insights in the present. So we're not rigid and laser focused, but it rather keeps a guardrails on us, but allows us to play inside those guardrails. It's not just nothing though. I mean, because one of the things we find is there's a big difference between being goal less and being goal free. Goal free still means you have aspirations, you're free from the burden of the goals, but you still have things that pull you forward. Whereas if you're goal less, you're just sort of sitting on your butt eating bonbons and watching Jerry Springer. So it's important to distinguish
Hmm.
goal free living from goal less living from goal driven living. They're three very different things.
Hmm. And I also love that themes comes up in the book. This idea of making themes for your month or your year. I really personally have connected with that, and I've been using that for 8 years, and I love it. So that's another piece of it that I love. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. Well, we just had New Year's Eve 6 weeks ago, and that's one of the times when we set our resolutions, our goals for the year. So our resolutions are I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to stop smoking. And most goals and most resolutions are, sort of these well defined, you either succeed or you fail types of objectives. And the key is, I find that from a resolution perspective, it's much better to have themes. Themes aren't measurable. Themes, sort of in the moment, help you decide whether you're making the right choices.
Mhm.
So for me, a common theme that's been in my business every year has been leverage. And what that means is it's really trying to figure out what are the things that I can do that have the greatest impact
Mhm.
with the least amount of effort. Now, this whole mindset then requires me to think about my partnerships differently. Who do I work with? And so that one word can be very profound in terms of the decisions it helps me make, but at the same time, it's not so specific that it cuts off other opportunities.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I like the analogy too of the compass, and the second secret also has the similar kind of map idea when you say trust that you're never lost. I love that. Can you talk about what that is?
This one is actually probably one of my favorites because it really gets to the heart of this belief that in life there are right decisions and wrong decisions. And in fact, there aren't right decisions or wrong decisions. There's only consequences. You can choose whatever you want to do with your life, but there's no universal correctness to anything. And so what happens is that if you trust that you're never lost, then whatever you're doing is where you are supposed to be. And again, I don't mean this in some type of metaphysical way. I mean, I really mean this in a look. It's a matter of being able to say, hey, this is where I am. Let's make the most of this. Recognize I can always change the course of direction in the future. But there's this thing called decidophobia, which drives people crazy. Decidophobia is a fear of making decisions. And the reason why we fear making decisions is we treat every decision like it's this big, humongous thing. Like if I make this decision now, oh my God, what's going to happen? And the reality is, look, you can make decisions, and it doesn't mean you change your mind, because that's actually, to me, the worst thing to do is say, it's sort of like buyer's remorse. You buy something, and then you say, oh, that wasn't such a good purchase. That's really bad. Look, if you make a decision, commit to it, go forward with it, and gain new insights, and over time you will know the right answers. But it's about, basically, as my sister likes to say, when you sit on the fence, you get splinters in your butt. And so the key thing is just choose one side or the other, make progress. It's about making progress in life. It's not about analyzing life to death.
Mm-hmm. I like this, the third one. Remember that opportunity knocks often, but sometimes softly. Can you talk a little bit about that? I like that. I like the analogy. And to me, it reminds me of that small voice that's in your head. It's always very soft, but you have to really either meditate or do something to bring you back to it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact quote that I have in the beginning of the chapter, but it's something like, opportunity knocks often. And when it knocks, you're basically at your neighbor's house complaining about the noise or something like that. And I think, and this comes back to the goal orientation. And meditation is great because that opens up your mind. It actually frees up your mind. And because if you have the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex operating, which is our judgmental analytical part of the brain, it chokes off the neural pathways to other parts which allow us to see things. So basically what happens is we live in a world of the brain is wired for something called confirmation bias, which basically means whatever your strongly held belief is, you will always find evidence for that. But as a result, you're not going to see things that are inconsistent with your belief structure. So you need to do things to either, as you said, meditate, which quiets that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which allows you to take in new opportunities. Because here's the reality is if you get so laser focused on your goals the way you think they're supposed to be, the way they're supposed to look, the odds are you're going to miss bigger, better opportunities. And there's sort of this mathematical experiment I do with audiences. And it has to do with, it's just probability. To me, life is probability. And all we're trying to do is increase the probability of great things happening to us. And what happens is, and I'll just explain the mathematical thing real quickly because I think it's very powerful. So if you have a group of people and you want to have 100% chance that two people have the same birthday, you're going to need 367 people in the room because the first person's going to be January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd. You get through the entire calendar, and that next person has to have the same birthday as someone else. So you're guaranteed. So the question is, how many people do you have to have in order for there to be a 50% chance? And some people think, well, maybe it's about 180, but actually the number is only 23. If you have 23, try this sometime. You have a group of 23, 24, 25 people, and have everybody give the month and day of their birthday, you will have a 50% chance that two people have the same birthday. In fact, with 40 people, it's up to 90%. So these connections are likely. But then, like I remember I was doing a speech on goal-free living in front of 500 people. And I said, how many people do you have to have in a room for there to be a 50% chance that someone will have a specific birthday? So I said, my birthday is April 25th. Does anyone in this room have my birthday? No hands went up. Because you need 600 people in order for there to be a 50% chance that two people have a particular birthday. And the point of this is just that when we're looking for something specific, when our goals are narrowly defined, when the way we think the world is supposed to operate is within very, very small constraints, we miss opportunity. But if we open up our minds a little bit and allow things to unfold in a more natural way, there's opportunities everywhere, but we're just not seeing them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that. That reminds me too of lucky people. People that say some people are very, very lucky, but it seems like they just have that ability to not go into one exact thing and think that's exactly what I need to happen. They're more open to all kinds of different possibilities. So that makes sense.
Yeah, in fact, I was talking with Richard Wiseman, who wrote a fantastic book called The Luck Factor. It's like the only scientific study on luck. And basically, the reason why he and I connected is that he has found that the people who aren't hyper focused on specific, well defined, far off in the future goals are luckier. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have short term things like, hey, today I need to get some things done. We're not talking about that.
Right.
Because look, there's things you have to get done. Otherwise, you just sort of sit around. But it's like when you get so laser focused about the future, as you point out, you become less lucky.
Right. Absolutely. And number four, which I think is connected, I think it's a nice connection into number three. Want what you have is secret number four.
This, I mean, most people want to have what they want. So I want this and I want it now. And we're this instant gratification society. And I've just found for me that the single greatest factor in driving my success in many respects is my deep and profound appreciation for my life as it is. It doesn't mean there aren't things that I aspire to. It doesn't mean that there are things that wouldn't make it better. But my life is perfect by my definition, exactly as it is right now and always has been. And when you come from the place of your life is perfect, no matter what's going on, and I know this is not always easy, but like if you can really just grasp about how awesome things are, then look, everything else just builds on that. It's not trying to fix something. And what happens is you as a human being, first of all, operate from a different perspective. People want to be around people who are nice, who are likable. And what I found is, and this is going to come into a future one, which is the people magnet one, is look, if you're a person who has a profound appreciation for life and a profound appreciation for others, then people are going to be attracted to you. And I don't mean that in a want to date you kind of way. People are going to be attracted to your messages and your causes and want to support you in everything you do. And here's the thing I know, there's nothing that I've done in my life of any significance that was done without the help of others. And therefore, this deep appreciation leading to connecting with other people, to me, is one of the keys of success.
And I love that we're getting into this a little bit too. Like you said, it'll come up a little later, but a lot of these are personal, and then they start becoming more interpersonal as we go, more other focused. How can I help others? But coming from that place of what do I have that I appreciate and that I love, a lot of times that is the people that you're around and the great experiences you're having. So I think you're absolutely right, and we can jump into that one after this one. Number 5 is seek out adventure, which is exciting, and I think it also attracts people to you as well.
Yeah, seeking out adventure is pretty much what it sounds like. It just means it sort of, I guess, the impetus for this one, and I don't remember if I quoted Steve Jobs or not because I don't remember if I had the quote at that point, but he said, creativity is just having enough dots to connect.
Mm-hmm.
Dots being ideas or experiences. And the reason why creative people are so is they've either had more experiences, they've thought more about their experiences than other people. And so if goal-free living is about creative living, coming back to what you were saying earlier, well, creativity is having enough dots to connect. And the problem is in life, what we tend to do is, for a whole variety of evolutionary reasons, we hang out with people who are like us. It's just, our tribes. It's safer to be with people who think like us, who act like us, who, if I'm an accountant, I want to hang out with accountants. And if I'm introverted, yeah, I might want to hang out with some of the outgoing people because I'll get into their social life. But the reality is I'm most comfortable with the introverts. And so what happens is we end up creating a very, very small circle of dots, a small circle of experiences, a small circle of people, disciplines, ideas that we're exposed to. And if you want to be able to live a more powerful life, if you want to increase the probability of success, if you want to increase the probability of these cool things happening in your life, well, it's not going to happen if you're living within a very, very narrow band. So by seeking out adventure and trying new things and reading new things, and like, for example, so I talk about innovation, that's my main business, but in a few weeks I go to Las Vegas and I'm spending a week with a world-class magician learning magic, because to me, I call that a purposeful tangent. It's something related to what I do, but it's not exactly what I do, and I will learn from it, because to me, magic and innovation are related, and that magic tells us blind spots about the brain. And that's what we're trying to figure out what goes on with innovation. So the more we do those adventurous things, the more we get new insights, and those insights get connected into new experiences, which create new opportunities.
That's really cool. And again, it kind of reminds me of having a compass and not a map, and trusting that you're never lost, because if you are willing to go out and have an adventure and not know exactly what's going to happen, some really wonderful things can happen.
Well, exactly. The more you do, the more chances you have of that probability working in your favor. Exactly.
So let's talk about number 6 a little bit, become a people magnet.
Yeah, we touched on this one already a little bit. And I think just this one can be summarized very quickly is, the things that happen in your life are only going to happen when you have the right people in your life. And, you can be like some people who like to network, but that to me, that's sort of a push form of relationships. It's like, okay, I'm going to go after people. I'm going to find the right person. I'm going to go seek out the best people, and only the best people am I going to talk to. And first of all, it's exhausting. And the other thing is, it just misses out the fact that, especially today, everybody's connected to someone. And you never know who you're going to sit next to. You never know who's going to be, 1 degree of separation from the person you really want to meet. And so, yes, there's nothing wrong with being proactive and going out and doing the things that we typically do. But at the same time, I think it's really important for people to attract people to them. Be a nice person. Be a generous person. The best way to be a people magnet is to make people feel more valuable, make people feel valued, make them feel like you're giving to them. That will have people want to be around you. And if you're inspiring and you're positive, look, and I'm not saying being this utopian, Pollyannic optimist, but people don't want to be around grumpy people. They want to be around optimistic and energetic people who have vision and a passion. And I think that, in my life, if I look at it, I'm shocked at the types of things people are willing to do with me and for me. But I think it's because I've created a life that's exciting, that people want to be around. And I like to believe that I'm generous and wanting to make sure that everybody gets something out of what I've learned over my life.
And it reminds me of number 4, that when you want what you have and you want who you have, then you're really connecting to the person right there. You're not talking to one person, your eyes are off there looking at someone else, wishing you were talking to them instead. If you really truly embrace the people you're around and care for them and listen to them, people love that. So I think if you're, like you said, being a people magnet, but not in a push and run around and connect to as many people as possible kind of way, and live by secret number 4, then it works out great.
That's so great, because I remember a few years ago I was at a book expo, which is where all the authors get together, and I was invited to this event, and Jack Canfield was there, one of the co-author of the Chicken Soup books, and he stood there with his glass of wine, and people would come up to him, and he was so focused on that one person, and they would talk as long as they wanted to talk, and he would be supportive and generous, but not in a way, hey, that's great. I mean, he would give them specific advice. And when it was something he thought was really valuable, he would give them his card. He didn't give his card to everyone, but his eyes were never darting around. There were famous people there that I'm sure he probably wanted to connect with, that he didn't do that. I thought that was so classy. And that just says a lot about Jack Canfield.
That's really great. So number 7, embrace your limits. What does that mean?
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting one, and it's just recognizing that as human beings, there's a shadow side of us that we want to try to hide from the rest of the world. But in the process of doing that, it actually will sort of manifest itself in less than desirable ways. So, you might think that, okay, I'm not like this one guy. It was so funny. I knew this guy for years, and we're having lunch one day. I said, "Hey, Mark, you are probably the smartest guy I've ever met." He said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "Well, first of all, you're smart, and you're going for your PhD, and you've got this thing, and you got that thing, and da 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 da." And he said, "Wow, that's really interesting. I don't think I'm smart. That's the reason why I'm going after all these things." Wow. And it had a stranglehold on him. He didn't feel free. So even if the world doesn't figure out this is something that's your shadow side, it prevents you from living the way you want to live. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it for myself. I'll just share something personal. I've suffered from something called the imposter syndrome. and I don't talk about this that much, but the imposter syndrome is something where I keep on waiting for somebody to say, "Ah, you're full of it, Steve. You don't know what you're talking about." And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, "Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about." Because as you go through life and you gain all these insights, you think, "Well, everybody knows this," or "I'm making this stuff up," or whatever. And it's had this stranglehold on me. And for the longest time, it was even reflected in my speech quality. Like when I was giving speeches, which is my main source of income, is in my mind, I kept on thinking, okay, today's the day. Somebody's going to figure out. I don't know. Somebody's going to ask the question I can't answer, and I'm going to fall apart.
Oh, wow.
And I went through this process of just saying, you know what? Screw this. This is how I feel. I'm going to start telling people about it. And I started telling every person I knew, hey, I feel like an imposter. And all of a sudden I realized, first of all, everybody in my profession feels like an imposter. After talking about it for a while, I got so bored of talking about my imposter syndrome, it vanished.
Hmm.
And now, and here's the interesting thing, is as soon as it vanished, my speeches got better, my income increased because I started doing a better job, and I was much freer and more natural. And when you're so worried about people discovering the dark side of you, you can't live freely. You can't live this passionate life if you're always trying to hide something.
Yeah. Wow. That's really great. And I'm not sure which secret that might apply to, but I'm thinking through that idea of knowing who you really are and embracing who you really are. That's life's work sometimes for people. That's really tricky stuff.
Right.
I love that personal story.
Yeah, so the embrace your limits was actually originally called embrace your inadequacies.
Hmm.
But we just sort of played around. Okay, well, people don't want to think about their inadequacies, but that's essentially what it is. And it's not that anybody's inadequate. It's just our perception of our inadequacies
Mm-hmm.
put a limit on what we're able to do, and they're not necessarily even real. They're self-imposed. And when you can, and I find for me the best way to embrace them is to talk about them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you hide them, they don't go away. But if you start talking about them at some point in the conversation, you just get tired of hearing yourself talk about it, and it sort of magically vanishes.
And it reminds me a little bit of humility, and I think that comes up here in the last secret, that when you don't take things personally, or you think of yourself more as maybe a vessel for something else, like bringing an idea to people or bringing wisdom to people. Then you said this in the very beginning. You said it's not necessarily that I know all these things; it's that I'm able to connect a lot of things together and present other people's wisdom, which I think is wonderful. But the last secret is remain detached. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, I think this one is, in some respects, I mean, they're all useful and important, but this one might be one of the most important. And it really just, it's not, it's not saying don't be attached to anything. It's just don't be attached to a future outcome. Because if you're so worried about how something's going to happen in the future, you can't perform the best in the present. So I sort of think about it in terms of sales. If you're so worried about, am I going to make the sale? I've got to make this. Oh, if I don't make this sale, well, you're going to come across as like a used car salesperson. And that's not a really good way to come across. So I struggled with this for a bit because I knew we can't be attached to the outcome. We can't be attached to the future. But I was like, okay, that's interesting, but how do you not? I mean, like people want what they want.
Yeah.
And I got this great advice from this guy who's sort of a spiritual teacher. And he said, if you want to be detached from the future, you want to reattach yourself to something of a higher purpose, something that's more present moment, something that is going to be serving other people potentially. And so if you're selling, instead of worrying about the sale, which is in the future, think about the person you're with. Like you were talking about conversations. Don't worry about all the other noise. Be there with the person, listen to them, and really truly try to ask them the right questions and be supportive of them, but without being pushy.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do this, life tends to flow much better because I think when you're worried about the future, can we activate particular parts of the brain? I mean, this comes back to like athletics. I mean, there's like if you're Tiger Woods in the midst of all of his scandal, and you're on the putting green, and you're trying to make a putt, and that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is talking. It literally, they call it choking because it literally chokes the neural pathways to the cerebellum, which is the part of the brain where he's practiced all those putts thousands of times. So you can't be achieving the things you want to achieve when you're choking those neural pathways. And so either you need to attach yourself to something in the present moment, do something differently of a higher value that serves other people. Or you talked about meditation. That's also another great way to quiet that part of the brain. But even in doing that, I still find it useful to come back and say, okay, well, if I'm not going to be attached to the sale, or I'm not going to be attached to things looking a particular way, what am I going to do in the present moment that's going to make sure that I make progress and accelerate things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, the values are key. Also, you haven't mentioned the word ego, but I think ego loves the future and ego loves the past, but ego really doesn't have much to say about the present because it's not going to feed the ego more than likely. So I think it's interesting. When I think of detachment, I think of detaching the ego from the equation and trying to focus on the present moment and on values and on the other person. And that it's hard, very, very hard to do. But I think, like you're saying, it can be a key to all the other pieces, that if you can do that, everything else can flow much easier.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point about the ego. Is that what happens is, in a lot of things we do, the reason why we want what we want is we are convinced that when we achieve that future goal, something great's going to happen. I will be happy. I mean, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but in the book, we did this statistically valid survey in terms of people's levels of happiness, and it was fascinating because I think it was like 3/4 of the people said that they've convinced themselves that they will be happy when something happens in the future. Well, then the study also showed that when people achieve those things in the future, most people still weren't happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so they set another goal, and there's this perpetual belief that happiness lies in the future, as opposed to it already existing, already being with you. But again, that happiness comes back to ego, I think, to some degree, because I will be happy when I have more money. I will be happy when I have the status with my name on my door. I will be happy when, and that's just basically the ego saying that things are wrong right now.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to do something differently, and that's not the case. To me, those things are sort of like the topping on something that's already wonderful, but you don't need them for it to be wonderful.
Yeah, I love that. At the end of your book, you say, and I want to quote a little bit of your book because I think this is a really nice thing to say after all of these secrets are laid out for everyone. You said, think of your life as a blank sheet of paper. Eliminate the shoulds and the musts that you've let dictate your life. Instead, focus on your aspirations and your dreams. Create an expansive life full of possibility. Only by changing the way you see the world can you truly change your own actions. Don't worry about how to execute these 8 secrets. Just try them, play with them in small doses, practice the one that feels right. I think that's wonderful advice.
Well, thanks. And I think that's the key is we can sit around and talk about all this stuff. It's just about doing it. It's about getting out there and trying things. And it's interesting if we look at the word goal in the dictionary, the word goal comes from the Old English word for obstacle or barrier. And so when we set goals, I mean, it's even like with football, American football, the objective is to get to the goal line, which means to overcome the obstacle, which is some, 400-pound linebacker in the middle of the field. But that's what life is like, is we're trying to plow through these obstacles and barriers. Whereas inspiration or aspiration comes from the word inspire or spirit, which means to breathe life into.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one connotation or definition, which means panting with desire. So when I think about what would I rather have, the obstacles and barriers or panting with desire, and so it doesn't mean we don't have things we aspire to in the future, but these aspirations breathe life into us. They're not narrow and limiting, but they are the things that allow us to meander with purpose. And it's that purpose that becomes really important. But it's not the purpose of achieving something in the future. It's the purpose of giving us a context to enjoy the moment. It's like a vacation. If you've got a vacation plan for a few weeks, it changes who you are today. Mm-hmm. It's not about the vacation in the future as much as it is changing your beliefs today. And to me, that's what aspirations do. Is it's not about getting there. It's about changing how you see the world in this present moment. Because by the time you get to your future aspiration, the world will have changed. Your desires may have changed. And guess what? You probably will discover things about yourself and your life, and opportunities you didn't even know existed will start to appear. And if you really just kept this dogmatic view of this is where I want to be, you're going to miss out on huge opportunities.
I like that you mentioned the word vacation. In your book, you talk about work vacation, this adventure of writing the book you called a work vacation. So between your first book, 24/7 Innovation, and then Goal Free Living, you made this transition into doing what you love and what you're doing now. Can you talk about personally what that transition was like and what you learned over that transition?
Well, it's interesting because I learned quite a few things. One thing which I learned is even though I may be making a transition, the world might not be ready for that transition. Here's what I mean. So, I was with Accenture, working with large corporations. I leave Accenture, and I'm working with large corporations, talking about innovation, and talking about how do we develop new products and services and business models. And I come out with a book on goal free living. It ends up being a cover story in Oprah magazine and O magazine. And it actually caused some confusion because I had clients say, well, this goal free stuff, I don't get it. So clearly you're not serious about innovation.
Hmm.
So, these transitions, sometimes the world doesn't necessarily keep up at the same pace, but it doesn't mean you don't move through these things. And then the question is, well, how do you incorporate them? So if you want to make certain transitions in your life and the world sees you a particular way, maybe you don't do a 180-degree turn.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm a corporate guy. Now all of a sudden I'm like, hey, no goal. But maybe there's some middle ground that allows, again, it's sort of like not going too far out, but like, how do I do a 45-degree turn? Okay, well,
Mhm.
I'm talking about innovation. Now we talk about, instead of calling it goal free living, it could have been a book on creative living or
Mhm.
something to that effect and actually called it that because that might have resonated more with the audience. And then you slowly progress over time. Now, some people have been able to make major shifts. My personal experience is that you can only move as fast, especially if you're looking at it from an economic perspective, you can only move as fast as your buyers are willing to move and perceive your change.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
that, everybody's got a different experience. Sometimes you can, get the big break and you were one thing one day and you're something different the next day and the world embraces it because it just got this massive traction. So everybody's experience is different. And I guess that really, here's the key thing with all of this is, my latest book is called Best Practices Are Stupid.
Mhm.
And it's that for a reason. Because if anybody's advice, my advice, you'd be stupid to listen to it. Well, not stupid to listen to it, but stupid to implement it.
Mhm.
If you actually take and adopt what I'm saying, that's a mistake. You might want to adapt it. You might want to look at it and tweak it. Say, I like this one, but I don't like this one. But you need to be critical because my life is not your life. My experiences are not your experiences. And what works for me may not work for you. And what didn't work for me may, in fact, be incredibly successful for you. So that to me is the key learning that I've had in everything that I've done is there is no one size fits all. We need to figure out what works best for us.
Absolutely. Well, one last question I wanted to ask for your readers and also for listeners to this interview. How can we help you in what you're doing?
Wow. So, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Here's the thing which would mean the most to me is if someone has read the book, Goal Free Living in particular, or if you haven't read the book and you buy the book and you do read the book, please write me because I know that a lot of people just don't write other people, especially like authors, because they think, man, whoa, they're not. Look, I'm just a guy. There's nothing more that lights up my day than getting a message from someone who's seen me speak or read a book of mine and it had a profound impact on their life. That to me would be the greatest gift somebody could give me is just sharing with me the impact that my work has had.
I love that. And you put your email right in the book. And in our case, you are practicing what you're preaching right now. And you reached out to me and said, thank you for the review. I put up a review of your book. Said to everyone how much I loved it. And you wrote back. And it really surprised me because, like you said, I think we elevate authors to such a level that we think, oh, they have no time. Or like Jack Canfield would never speak to me. And but in reality, I love that that's your advice, that we should reach out to you. I hope that people do. And I want to say thank you again. It's been wonderful to read your book. I want everyone to go out and get it. I have it here in case they haven't seen it in the background. It's a wonderful book. I think everyone should go out and check out all of your books, but this is a great one to start with. And I want to say thank you again for being so accessible, for being able to sit down with me, to reach out to everybody else through this interview. I really appreciate it very much.
Trust me, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate it.